Welcome to the Pathfinder Podcast, where we examine the paths of those that have gone before us and use this knowledge to smooth the process of forging our own path. In this YouTube episode today, I have a selection of clips from an audio podcast where I interviewed Chase Clemens. Chase is currently on the precipice of graduating with a master's degree in journalism at Arizona State University's Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication. Chase served as an infantryman in the legendary 2nd Battalion of the 75th Ranger Regiment, deploying to Iraq as a part of Joint Task Force Operation Inherent Resolve. In these clips, Chase shares his motivation for joining the U.S. Army, how he was able to get an Option 40 Ranger contract, and the importance of training like you fight. I became acquainted with Chase during the Salute to Service Week here at Arizona State University, a week encompassing Veterans Day that is packed full of events focusing on veterans and their accomplishments in the service to the United States. Chase received the Fox Forward Scholarship, which is awarded to journalism students demonstrating academic excellence. Today, Chase and I occupy the Election 2024 set in the KAET Arizona PBS studio for this interview. With that said, let's hear from Chase.
You kind of didn't have like a Ranger Handbook moment. What kind of triggered it?
I didn't have a Ranger Handbook moment, but in college I did read Where Men Earn Glory by John Krakauer.
Yep. Where Men Win Glory, yeah.
Yeah, Where Men Win Glory. Sort of the definitive biography, I would say.
Correct.
Of Pat
he
Tillman.
had the most access to people involved in Pat Tillman's life, I think. I've looked at several of the books written on Pat Tillman, and I think that's the best.
Yeah, and he's a great author. I wouldn't say I read that book and I was like,
I gotta go.
Yeah. But it definitely made an impression on me. I thought I was familiar with Pat's story, having grown up in, Arizona. And of course, like anyone who reads that book, found that story to be very inspirational. And I think just naturally, it was always kind of something in the back of my mind. I was pretty into like fitness and working out, and then, working in getting some, internship experience and spending a lot of time on kind of my advertising student work. I kind of had doubts that this was how I want to spend my 20s. And then in my free time, I'm like working out with my buddies, watching like those Buds old documentaries on YouTube.
Yeah.
And I was like, I think I want to do this, like a lot of, I think, typical males, who are my age at the time, you see these movies and I think a lot of people, I think most guys have that thought of, oh, I could do this. And I just kind of obsessively thought about it. And it got to a point where it was like, I don't want to look back on my life and never know.
So let's back up a little bit. Let's talk about the process. Actually, I'm really curious about the process you went through in getting contracted, because I know, so the Ranger contracts are called Option 40 contracts, and they're quite difficult to get. They're not easy.
So I wanted, that was the top of my wish list, was an Option 40 contract. I wanted to go to regiment just because the pipeline to get there was quicker. I was older, so I kind of wanted to like have the opportunity to, get boots down, like in the fight, theoretically as quick as possible. SF selection, it's an extra year and a half. So I knew I wanted to go to Ranger Regiment. There weren't any contracts. So I sort of signed in pencil, not literally, but metaphorically, I guess, because that was the only option. So I was like, okay, I guess, SF would still be, that's a pretty humbling opportunity to try out for too. Slightly different mission set. Maybe it makes sense being older. Could be a better fit. And then that's what I was gonna do from after, I took the ASVAB and all the tests, and then went to MEPS, the first time. And then you go, so that's all the medical testing in the Army,
right,
to make sure you're qualified. And then you sort of go back one more time when you ship out to kind of confirm your medical records, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, they're looking for an anomaly. So it's funny, one of the things I told some young lieutenants recently, they're into drinking the power, or the energy drinks.
Yeah.
And I was like, hey, it's all well and good, but I mean, I got a problem with my blood pressure. And if I drink an energy drink, it's going to be, bulls on parade. So and my son did this. He drank a Red Bull before he went for a physical. And they flagged him. And I was like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
You need to pay attention to this sort of stuff. So they're basically looking to make sure that, everything's good to go, that there's no changes, from the baseline that you did previously.
Correct. So long story short, there's this can fluctuate based off of each individual service member, but there can be a long lead time from when you go into a recruiter's office and kind of commit to doing this to when you actually go back to that recruiter's office and they drive you to MEPS and then the airport to go to basic training. So on that last day where my dad dropped me off to the recruiter's office, who was then taxing me to MEPS to ship out to Benning, he checked his computer and coincidentally there was an option 40 contract.
Wow. So what were you thinking you were going to do before that option 40?
I thought I was going to do, I forget what it was called. Was it 18 X-ray?
18 X-ray, yeah.
So I was going to do that because that was, in my mind, I don't say the next best thing, like regiments, but
for your goals,
yeah,
in your
for
timeline.
For my goals, it was okay. If option 40 is not on the table, this would be the best next thing, and I kind of had to make a decision right then and there. And I remember, I don't know if this is just recruiter BS, but he was like, yeah, in my several years of doing this, this is the first time I've seen that come up.
He's probably telling you the truth, to be honest.
Because he already had me locked in, right?
They're super hard to get, when my son went in, I don't know if they were BSing him or not either, but there was a hard to get his MOS. It was a hard to get MOS, and they were like, hey, it just came in, and we don't know how long it's going to be there. And come to find out, when he went to his basic and advanced individual training, there were people who were really trying hard to get there, and his MOS is a really good springboard into the civilian sector if and when he chooses to do that. So he was probably telling you the truth.
I had just turned 24, and I was, it was kind of now or never. So decided.
Yeah, you're really at your peak physical condition. I mean, you can go a long time and be physically fit, but at that point in time, your body's definitely responding to you the best that it possibly can. So it's interesting. I get approached here on campus by young men who are thinking about going into some type of special operations, and get questions. What's the process? What do you need to do? And what I always tell people is train for the event. Mm-hmm. What do you want to do? Figure out what your timeline is, and then train for the event. And it's funny because a lot of them, they want to get cute with their training. I'm going to do deadlifts and I'm going to do this and that. And I'm like, well, okay, I'll let you explain. What are the main events for the Ranger Regiment that you have to maintain a standard?
Yeah, so I would have this conversation all the time for the newer privates who were going to Ranger School. So in Ranger Regiment, after a certain point, you go to Ranger School to get your tab. That's sort of the final step of the selection. It's kind of confusing, and the standard PT wise is pretty similar to RASP.
So for those out there who don't know, RASP stands for Ranger Assessment and Selection Program.
Yeah.
Right. Used to be RIP.
Back
in the day,
Ranger Indoctrination Program, right. Which I think sounds a lot cooler.
It was cooler, so back
like
in
everything in the Army used to
they moved. RIP used to be right down by the airfield at Fort Benning, and I would run by there. My unit would run by there in the morning, and we'd be smelling their breakfast cook, and I was like, those guys have got it good, man.
We would still run down there.
Yeah.
But long story short, so to pass any selection, whether it's like SF or getting through a course like Ranger School, There's going to be, you know, these PT events that are sort of the main, I would say, barrier to passing.
So, like, for instance, I know there's a standard for a 5-mile run. There's a standard for a 12-mile ruck march. What are those standards?
Yeah. So, gosh, I'm trying to remember. I want to say like 58 or something.
It's 40 minutes or less for the 5-mile run. I know you got to do 8-minute miles. And then I don't know what the standard is for the Rangers for the 12-mile, but I know for the EIB it's 3 hours or less.
Yeah, so for Ranger School it's the same.
Okay.
But how we did it at Regiment was the standard was higher.
Of course.
So basically every private is competing to go to Ranger School. And so sort of the top, 10 out of however many test at Regiment get to go. And we had our own standard that was higher than Ranger School. That way, theoretically, when you go to school, if you can pass here, you're gonna pass there. So I think once a month, about once a month, it'd be like the first Monday or Tuesday, there'd be we called it a cert test. So you would do push-ups, sit-ups, the 5-miler, and then pull-ups became a thing too, and then land ab and ruck would be like later in the week. But whatever those standards were, I think push-ups, I want to say it's like 58 or 52.
Right.
Sit-ups, it's I forget, it's a little bit more.
I think they're like in the 60s. I remember you have to get like 90% in each category for the fitness, the Army physical fitness test. It's changed now, so I'm super dated on the whole thing. But I know that basically what they're doing is they're setting you up for success by giving you that cushion of, okay, here's the standard for the school, you need to be above it. So in a stress environment where your heart rate's going to be higher, your fatigue level's going to happen faster, that you're going to have gas in the tank already.
Absolutely, and you're going to be living in like the open barracks of school. You're not going to be.
You're going to get
at
sick,
the same.
right?
Yeah, you're going to be at the same level you are, just in the comforts of your own home. But I would tell, my kind of junior teammates, like, test yourself on whatever that event is. Like when you're training up for it, do different things, like benching and like all these things to improve your strength and fitness, but also like specifically like train that event and like test yourself, or like have a friend like hold your feet to the standard that you will for sit-ups and do that test, once a week, or whatever it is, because like the old cliche, like train like you fight. To me, it just made sense. Like actually do that event, and then it's going to give you confidence, because if every week you're passing, or maybe you do the test and you're a little bit sore and you're still passing, when it comes to test day, you're not
for sure.
We heard an amazing story today with Chase Clemens, sharing his path from undergraduate to U.S. Army Ranger to minor league intern and graduate student at the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication. Some big takeaways from this episode. Number 1, be methodical in your path towards your career. Number 2, don't be afraid to challenge yourself with the mindset of never quitting. Number 3, plan for your transitions early like Chase did using the SkillBridge internship program offered by the Department of Defense. Number 4, utilize experts to assist you like Chase did with his academic counselor. And lastly, develop your network of friends and colleagues to uncover opportunities. Think of it as a detective work you'd do to uncover the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. There's probably 6 degrees of finding your dream job. Having said all that, now it's time for some dad advice. A lot of people say they can't afford this or that, but at the same time, I see them blowing their hard-earned cash on frivolous things. Take some time and add up what it's costing you for all the dining out day to day. You'll be surprised if you add all those expenses up to see what your total monthly spend is. It'll be shocking. I've mentioned this in my episodes on how to make things and do things for yourself and save money. Every Sunday, I meal prep for the week. I make a batch of some different foods and put some in the freezer. These are my lunches for the days on campus. You can't get a sandwich on campus for less than $8, and forget buying those expensive drinks at Starbucks. If you really want to go buy a drink, head over to the veteran-owned businesses just off campus in your local community. I treat myself every once in a while to a Black Rifle coffee at Black Rifle Coffee Company. So save your money, have an emergency fund that you can cover your month-to-month expenses or a significant expense like a car breakdown. After hearing from Chase today, I think we can all be inspired to work a little harder, push ourselves a little longer, and attain those goals. And remember, Rangers lead the way. If you learned something from Chase's story that's useful in forging your path, reach out to us. Please like and subscribe to the Pathfinder Podcast and share the show with all those you feel might benefit from the Pathfinder stories. This is Salty the Sun Devil, coming to you from the Arizona PBS studio at the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication in beautiful downtown Phoenix. Now find your path.